the Deaf Doom Metalhead, and I'm doing a special video today about a certain guitar pedal that is well known for anyone who likes death metal, especially Swedish death metal. But what I want to do in this video is kind of break down this pedal and talk about its history a bit, and also kind of take away some of the myths and also show you some other bands that aren't Swedish death metal. There's more to it. So we're talking about the Boss Hm2. This was made in Japan between 1983 and 1991 and then manufactured in Taiwan for a little while before they brought in the Hm3. But in that time period, bands picked this up and kind of discover this whole new sound that you can get from just simply putting this in front of a distorted amp or even on a clean channel amp, and you get this horrible, nasty, chainsaw-like overdriven sound. There's almost like a fuzz kind of tone to it. I wouldn't say it's strictly a distortion pedal, it's more of a fuzz than anything else. And as a guitar player, you probably know what I'm talking about. And it has a very unique sound to it. I mean, you can replicate this with other techniques, and I'll kind of explain that through this video. But, you know, if you want that traditional Hm2 sound of bands like Entombed, Dismember, that kind of thing, all you have to do is slap one of these in front of your amp, and essentially you've got it. Crank it all up to max, and you'll get that kind of kettle boiling kind of sound, which is whistling like mad. And I love it. So yeah, the Hm2. So this is essentially what people would say is Swedish death metal, but there is more to it, like I said. But if we are going to talk about Swedish death metal, we have to talk about bands like Entombed, but also for me the main one is Dismember. This came out in 1991 like an ever-flowing stream, and when I think of Swedish death metal, I'll always say Dismember, the best of the early bunch of Swedish death metal bands. So we could talk about Grave, but technically they never used a Hm2 pedal. They are obviously Swedish, they are part of the early death metal movement, but if we're talking about the Hm2, they never used one. Reading on my notes here, Ole Lindgren confirmed that the Hm2 was never owned live or used on any Grave recording. He always used a Boss DS1 pedal into a Fender Bassman head to get their signature guitar tone. Very similar to the Hm2, and I can see why a lot of people would get the two mixed up, or even compare the two and say, yeah, definitely using a Hm2. They really weren't, and that's confirmed by the man himself. So when we're saying Hm2 Swedish death metal, we have to say Dismember or Entombed. So yeah. But it's not just death metal. You have other musicians that have used this pedal in their music. Around 1984, David Gilmour of Pink Floyd used it on his second solo album, About Face, and also on the 13th Pink Floyd album, which was released in 1987, called A Momentary Lapse of Reason. He used a Boss Hm2 pedal. I mean, I've never listened to those albums, but I'd love to hear them now just to see what he's using settings wise. I mean, I imagine he's cranked that all the way back down, because if you have this on, it just goes. It's just a horrible noise. So it'd be hilarious to listen to that. But each to their own. I mean, you can use a pedal in any kind of music style if you can tame it. But I've checked the serial number on mine, and this was made in 1987, so this is actually older than me by 2 years, which is pretty cool. Got this in my early teens, and I've used it ever since for various things to mess about with, but I've never strictly used it in a live setting. I think only once. It really isn't for me. I mean, but I'll get into that later. But what I want to talk about now is bands that have used this pedal in various styles, and you can kind of see what you mean. Just have a bit of fun with it, really. So the other album I have to talk about, which was released in 1992, is Unorthodox by Edgesanity. This band were formed in 1989 by Dan Swano and other great musicians. And this band are Swedish death metal, but more on the progressive side, and there's a lot more going on. It's not anything like Entombed or Dismember, very unique sounding, and they kind of had their own style of death metal, which I really love. Some of these tracks are really doomy, some of these tracks are really fast and aggressive, and there's all little bits in between, and it's a very unique band and a fantastic album. This was their second full length, and the first one is probably just as heavy, if not heavier, if you can pick that one up. So we have to talk about Edgesanity. But another main one that people probably know of is the band Bloodbath. These Swedes are formed by Mikael Arkenfeldt from Opeth, a couple of chaps from Catatonia, and Dan Swano of Edgesanity. And they basically formed this band to kind of pay homage to Entombed, but also the American death metal sound. And Bloodbath obviously use Hm2 pedals. in all their albums, I believe, apart from maybe the first one. And yeah, this is absolutely killer. This actually features a different vocalist. It has the chap from Hypocrisy, Peter Lindgren or something like that. I can't remember his name, or Peter Tegarian or something like that. But yeah, absolutely fantastic band. Still going strong today, with the chap from Paradise Lost on vocals, Nick Holmes. So yeah, if you never checked out Bloodbath before, strongly recommend it. Especially this album, Nightmares Made Flesh, which was released around 2004, I believe. Yeah. So yeah, go check that one out. Another one, which is kind of like a super group that kind of forms to kind of pay homage to that kind of style of death metal, is the band Valenfire. This is their second release called Splinters, which was slightly more different to the first one. The first one was more of a doom death album, and this is formed by Greg McIntosh of Paradise Lost. When his father passed away, he wanted to kind of put all his emotions into some music, so he started a side project with Hamish Glencross on guitars from My Dying Bride at the time. And the drummer, I can't remember his name, but he was in At the Gates and Paradise Lost at the time, and they formed a band. So yeah, really, really good album, and it uses a HM2 sound. You can really hear it on this one. There's a picture of the band there, if you can see it. This is quite an old album now. It just came out back in 2014, so you know, it's been out for a few years now, and they've had a third one that have since gone on hiatus. They don't exist anymore. But this is really strong, overdriven HM2 with kind of cross-punk influences, doom, grindcore. It kind of has everything in it on this album, and the third one kind of branched on that even more. Yeah, worth checking that one out. And then you've got a few albums here from bands that kind of pay homage to HM2, and it's, you know, and pretty much declare it in their music. The main one for me would be Germany's Revolut Flesh, which I'm wearing a t-shirt now. This band are essentially what I think Dismember could probably sound like now if they put out a new album. So it's got that HM2 driven guitar tone, the guttural vocals with kind of a crusty punk kind of vibe going on to it in some of the tracks, but it's just really good HM2 Swedish death metal inspired music. You know, they have their own sound obviously in regards to music and compositions and stuff like that, but they all use this, so it instantly get compared to the early Swedish death metal bands. But a really cool band. Love this band to death. Really, really good band. Another one that kind of mixes more of a hardcore influences into style. This is what I was talking about, where bands use kind of different styles to kind of use the HM2. It's not just Swedish death metal inspired music. You could say bands like Gatecreeper. This is their album Deserted, which is their second full length. This has a really strong HM2 sound on it. And these guys, you know, they have a kind of hardcore sound to their music almost, but it is death metal, and they're kind of branched in like kind of hardcore, and then they've got grindcore elements in their music, they've got doomy elements in their music. They kind of cross all those bridges with their sound at the moment, especially with their new EP as well. They've got, you know, very, very fast stuff, and then the very last track is just all out doom, which is fantastic. But yeah, well, again, all use the HM2, and you know, today I believe they use more modified versions of the HM2, so they don't strictly use this version anymore. They use, I think it's Left Hand Wrath is one that's made by a chap in America, and there's other modified versions of it, so that's really cool. And then you have bands like these ones here. You've got Mordhau from the UK. This is purely HM2 worship at its finest. I mean, even the tape is orange, and it does pay massive respects to bands like Entomb, Dismember, with the compositions and the style of death metal that they play. But you know, again, yeah, it can be compared to that in style, and yeah, it's not a different sound or approach, but it's still really good death metal. But there's other bands like Scotland's Coffin Mulch that kind of use that really, really old school autopsy sound, but use the HM2 to give that really nasty, overdriven guitar tone. Can't confirm 100% they use a HM2, but it really does sound like they are. And you know, I hope I'm right, but I'm fairly sure I am. But really, really good band. This came out just this year, and a really fantastic EP. Really crusty, horrible death metal with a really overdriven chainsaw guitar sound that you get from the HM2. And then this one here is a Japanese band that use HM2 style death metal, but they put grindcore influences into it, so it's just all out napalm death sounding like Dismember is what it sounds like to me. And that is the band Mortify. This is their 2021 EP called Grotesque Buzzsaw Defilement. You can think of that. But if you look in the J card here, I think this has got a picture of it, you can see the zombie holding a HM2 pedal there, so you already know what you're going to get just by looking at that artwork there. You got the buzzsaw going through his head, because that's what essentially the guitar tone sounds like. And yeah, like I say, if you like Napalm Death, very early Napalm Death, like Scum Napalm Death mixed with Dismember, you know, you're going to get that. So fantastic band. And last album I want to touch on this album is one of my own albums. I'm kind of round off this video. So in 2014, my band Consecration put out an album called Ephemerality through UKEM Records. And while we were recording this, at the time I was using an MXR pedal going into my Laney TI-100 amp. And I was happy with the guitar tone, but the guy recording it, the producer, who's I believe the manager for Cradle of Filth now, Danny something or other, he said to me, why don't you try a Marshall 800 series amp and plug a HM2 pedal into it and just jack it up and then splice the two tones together. And I did, and I absolutely loved it, and that is the guitar tone you can hear on this album. So I used this on this album, but I mixed it with a JCM 800, which is made famous by Kerry King, guitar players like that. It's just got this really nasty kind of overdriven sound, but then when you put one of these in front of it, it just sounds ferocious. And then I mixed it with my live setup, and yeah, that's what you get. But I think you could probably hear this more than anything else on this album, because when this goes, you can hear it through anything. You know, you can't hide it. So yeah, that was my video about the HM2. Classic death metal pedal, but also grindcore, hardcore. You know, there's lots of bands using this for different styles, and like I said, David Gilmour's even used it in some of his early albums. So it's not just Swedish death metal you can hear this on, you can hear this in loads of different projects. So please like this video and subscribe to the channel if you're new and enjoyed this video. Please leave me a comment below what you think of this video, and also some bands that you think I should check out that I may have not heard before. I mean, I know there's bands like Lick. They put out an album last year which is heavily HM2 sounding, and obviously Entombed didn't show any of their albums because they don't own any. I've never got around to buying Left Hand Path or Clandestine. You know, they're on my list to get eventually, but like I say, I'm a massive Dismember fan over them anyway, so when I find Dismember records over Entombed, I'm always going to go Dismember. So again, in the meantime, I hope you're all well. Thanks for watching this video, and I'll speak to you guys soon. Take care.